Yeah, man. It's funny when a door closes and how another one opens. It's like because there's a vacuum, something needs to replace it. Because early this year, as many of you know, I was hosting or co-hosting a Mexico retreat where we're going to do a mushroom ceremony and peyote, and of course the pandemic happened, that got cancelled, and I'm stuck in Australia, right? Our borders are closed and I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. Then a few weeks ago, an opportunity came up where I ended up doing a mushroom ceremony, and it was very much inspired by the Native American tradition where you sit around a fire. And the ceremony is done very differently, and it's not like ayahuasca where you drink, you go to your bed and you just lie down and travel where you need to travel. This is all about being grounded and centered, keeping your eyes open the whole time. You're actually not allowed to close your eyes and drift off, and you have to sit up and not even on a cushion. You can't even lean on anything. You gotta actually physically sit up, and it's an all-night ceremony, so you don't get any sleep. And the ceremony starts at about midnight, and well, it starts before then, but this is around the time where you have the medicine, which we had with honey, because the way it was explained is that the real medicine is honey that just so happens to have mushrooms in it. I could see that. And it's really interesting because I got told, I'm going to go like back and forth a little bit, but there's a reason for this. But at the end of the ceremony, I got told that I had double a heroic dose. And if you've listened to my latest trip reports, you know that I don't I don't even like the word trip, but I don't journey very often with these substances. And I'm usually very, very sensitive to the point where 1 gram will send me there. It really would. And after doing this ceremony, it reminded me very powerfully that it's all about the context and how you set up the journey. Because when you're sitting up all night and you're staying disciplined and centered and anchored, and you're singing songs in a group, and you have to really show up, because you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the group, you're doing it for the earth, and honoring creator or God, source, whatever language you wish to use. But it's much bigger than yourself, it's greater than your individual needs. So the way that this ceremony was set up, which was done so beautifully, man, it really was. It's actually my favorite. Not only was it my first legitimate mushroom ceremony, but this type of ceremony, I resonate more than any ceremony that I've done, just because of the amount of discipline and structure that it has. And I don't mean structure as in a rigid way of everything has to go according to this, because a lot of it is actually felt out with what's needed in the moment. The reason why I bring this back to the context and having a double heroic dose is because throughout the ceremony, I hardly felt the transition, even from being in a normal state of consciousness to a non-ordinary state of consciousness. It was so seamless, and I didn't even realize I had that big of a dose. It really felt like I had a small dose, to the point where I even had to remind myself throughout the ceremony every once in a while to feel like, wait, am I feeling the medicine? I'd close my eyes and I'd see like this honeycomb fractal hive. It was like kind of moving in this serpent-like way. And I was like, yep, okay, I'm definitely feeling it. Okay, now back to the fire. There's just something about sitting up and really focusing that keeps you grounded and keeps you centered, So throughout the whole night, even though I had a double heroic dose, I did not travel to the astrals at all. I was always here, present. And there's something really, really powerful about that, because the reason why this ceremony is done this way, and I'm not going to obviously reveal location or names or anything like that for obvious reason, but the reason why it's done this way is because when you're lying down and you're just traveling wherever you need to travel, and you're just getting all these revelations and downloads about the universe and knowledge and the opening Pandora's box, and you're like, yes, I understand everything now. But then as soon as the ceremony's over, and then you get up, you wake up, it's like you lose it all. And it's like, wait, what happened? And then you can only really bring certain pieces together. But when you sat up the whole night, the transition from ceremony and normal consciousness is so seamless, and you're so in your body, and you're really able to pack in that integration and the knowledge, or whatever comes in, because sometimes it might not even be about getting knowledge at all. Sometimes the night could really just be about battling your physical discomfort of sitting up, like myself. A lot of it was like that, because I struggled to sit up. But it's all about the finer details in life that reveals the bigger picture. So while it seems like a little thing, it's a huge thing. It reveals everything there is to know about you. And my intention is to embody more of that warrior king archetype, whereas the king really represents that energy of giving and service, right? Serving not what your individual passions want, but God's will, what you're here on this earth to do. And sometimes your passion isn't necessarily the same as what God wants. And sometimes these things can overlap. And I think on the deepest level, your soul wants what God wants, but you need to peel back the layers, because sometimes the ego is very tricky in that way, and it can distract you in wanting to do all these other things. But the king is all about service, not just to God and source, but to the land, to his people, right? Being a good father and husband. And the king represents fertility, abundance. Where you have a good king, that's when the land flourishes, people are happy, businesses grow, babies are born. Tension is at its low point. Of course, with every archetype, you've got the bipolar shadows, the active and passive side, which I'm not going to go into it here, but of course I need to transition more into that king archetype in its fullness, which in many ways is the centerpiece of all archetypes. And the warrior really represents doing what needs to be done, whereas the king represents being who you need to be. And doing what needs to be done requires a lot of discipline and focus, and being able to discern what's good and what's bad, and to be able to shut off the voices in your head, right? Because when you go into this overthinking mode, which is something that I've been stuck in for the majority of my life, is that you need to be able to turn that off. Because when you're in this overthinking mode, distracts you. It pulls you away from what you need to do. And this can create doubt. And doubt creates hesitation. And hesitation leads into not doing anything. You need to pay attention. Especially in this world of chaos, and 2020, especially the way 2020 is going. And now, just not even 2020, but just our modern culture. Hey, we've got distractions left, right, and center. Even like when you go to the supermarket and you hear like this pop song or rap song that comes on, that affects you, man. Even if you're like consciously like, nah, I don't listen to this music, just the fact that it's there in the background, you gotta like really discern what you're allowing to enter into your mind. Because those lyrics, man, they're planting seeds. And it in many ways, it's a spiritual war out there, man. And in here, out there, in the collective. And so the warrior allows you to discern from these things and what's important. And so, yeah, this is kind of where my mind has been going this last few weeks, and transitioning more into manhood, because I know technically I'm a man, all right? I'm 28 years old, I live in my own house, I got my girlfriend, but I still have a lot of boyish tendencies, immature boy psychology that I need to shed off. Because there are many times where I put my passions first, And then my mind goes into all these different areas. And of course, it's good to spend time doing what you love to do. But you also got to discern from the distraction, because sometimes your passions, especially when you diverge too much into a million different things and you don't pay attention to the one core thing, the most important thing that you need to do, then that can cause some problems, you know. And so throughout this ceremony, I'm like going through this whole journey, but staring at the fire, and it was it was powerful stuff, man. And especially when you sing along, and it's like when we did it, it was only men. Not that it has to be, of course, women are invited too, but it just so happened to be only men, and it was a very, very nurturing vibe to it. You know, there's no judgment, and you got your brothers there to support you. And, you know, after the ceremony ended and the light came in, and it was really surreal being able to experience that transition from nighttime to daytime. And there was this time actually, man, throughout the ceremony where we did some rape, which is this shamanic tobacco snuff that gets shot into your nostrils. And then that really, if the honey and mushrooms open the door a little bit for transmissions to come through, right? The rape basically booted the door open, and then whoa, the floodgates came through. And it was almost like a DMT ayahuasca trip. Not so much with the fractals and traveling and ego death. I'm just talking about moving from one space to another and just you know. It's hard to put into words. And like I said, when you do psychedelics in a certain way, it doesn't have to be traveling in the astral. And I don't want to be dogmatic and think like, oh, this is the right way to do it and the other way is bad. It's not about that. But it's about being aware of how you do things and what your purpose is. Because sometimes traveling into wherever and just kind of being a leaf, right, and getting blown wherever the wind takes you. I mean, I'm not, maybe in certain situations that could be a good thing to do, but where I am right now, I need to be focused. I need to be disciplined and do these sacraments with respect, because they deserve respect. And I believe that mushrooms have their own personality, and they do have rules and regulations. And I think there is a diet protocol in place. I know that in the psychedelic community, we don't really think of mushrooms having like a diet protocol like ayahuasca does, but it does. And when you really take that preparation phase seriously and you abstain from sex, masturbation, crappy foods, you're putting your mind in the right place, and the more energy you put towards the mushroom experience, the more energy the mushrooms will give you, right? It's a give and take relationship. You can't just take. And this is, for those who've been following my journey, you know that I've gotten punished hardcore for going into these ceremonies with this arrogant thirst of gaining knowledge all the time, right? Taking. When really it's like, I need to give. What can I do for you? Not even just the mushroom. The mushrooms is a portal to something higher. Personally, I don't like messing with spirits and whatnot, but I like to honor nature. I like to use these ceremonies as a portal to honor the divine and source, and to be the person that I need to be and do what I need to do and shed off what isn't needed anymore. Yeah, I think we need to, well, I guess you can do whatever you want, but I would strongly suggest treating these sacraments with a great deal of respect. Because remember that even Terence McKenna at the end of his days, man, he got hyper slapped hardcore. And according to his inner circle, which I got told from a friend, I'm not going to name names and take it for what it's worth, but the mushrooms turned on him, man. Because apparently, and again, take it for what it's worth, he was just taking. He wasn't giving. And this is something that I've been doing my whole life. I'm guilty of this more than anyone. It's taking. I've been throughout my childhood, I was very much that kind of high chair tyrant, spoiled brat who just did things for his own selfish desires. And living in this consumerism culture where you just take things and throw away. So this year, especially with this pandemic, man, I've been taking it as a blessing. You know, I've had to shift a lot of things in my life. And now I've been hanging out in the farm a lot, planting trees, giving back to the land, being more conscious of, well, everything, of course. This is a practice I've always, well, at least these last few years, I've been trying to continue to be aware of the input that I allow into my consciousness, such as music, the TV that I watch, friends I hang out with. And sometimes you need to close the door on certain people, man. You know, and when you close the door, another one opens. It's just the way it works. Sometimes you got to be aware of the people that are hanging out with your life. And sometimes you need to let go of brothers, man. And it hurts. It's freaking painful. Especially people you've been friends with sometimes most of your life. Or at least many years. But in your heart of hearts, you know that they're not good for you. And that's kind of like, again, tapping into that warrior energy of doing what needs to be done, even if it's painful for both parties. But I think in the long term, you cutting off certain relationships with love and respect, of course, not in this spiritual ego, like, I'm better than you. You're just you're not spiritually aware like I am, and whatever. It's like the vegans who will unfollow anyone or befriend anyone that eats meat because you're a monster that's killing sentient animals. It's not that simple, man. You can't just cut everyone out because they don't agree with your ideals. That's not how this works, and this is not what I'm talking about. I don't want to focus too much on that right now, but I want to just continue talking about the ceremony. For those who are curious, so I don't get a flood of too many comments asking this, is the species of mushrooms that we had were, of course, the psilocybin subaeruginosa, which are an Australian native mushroom. They grow in New Zealand as well, actually, but I have a feeling that they originate in Australia, and it just so happened to spread to New Zealand. No offense to the Kiwis. But yeah, it was really, really powerful stuff. And I now realize more than ever that I don't want to say dose doesn't matter, because of course dose matters, but it's the context and how you do the ceremony which matters even more, and who you're doing it with. And it's hard. It's one of the most difficult challenge you will find in your life, finding a legitimate shaman that has honor and really has that, it's just that attention to detail, you know, and just that an intention that he has with every little thing that he does. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Because unfortunately, this psychedelic realm has turned into consumerism again. Well, a lot of these retreats are just like, at the end of the day, it comes to the bottom line, right? I'm going to make money. And I get it. I'm not dissing it. I mean, we need to survive, and that's just how our society is run. But it's also disheartening at times, because a lot of people allow this money to take over. Like, it's about priority again. The king energy. It's about honoring the highest. It is a hierarchy, man. You need to honor source first. That's number one. Not how much money do we need to make. Okay, and then how can we make a good ceremony? How can we serve people? No. It's got to be, you've got to swap that around. The money has to come. It has to be secondary. I'm not saying it's not important at all, because again, sometimes you need to make money when it comes to these things. But anyways, I don't want to go too much of a tangent there, but it's, well, to go back to my original point, it's hard to find a shaman who's actually legitimate and who does things with honor and respect, and who's really connected with these medicines. Because sometimes I think a lot of people who go into these ceremonies, especially those who become shamans, do it out of this ego, right? They do it because it's like, I want to help people. I want to be a part of this, but you don't get to choose whether you're a shaman or not. The plants choose that for you, and it has to be a very strong message. right? You don't choose it. It's not something that like you can become a shaman because it's your deepest desire. That doesn't matter, actually. It's not about what you want. It's about the path that's laid out to you, and you need to be honest with yourself about it. And when it comes to shamans, man, oof. Because I'm a maths and numbers guy, so I always like kind of put things into statistics. But I would say, like, me being generous, I'd say at least 95% of shamans out there are not legit. And it's really, really, I've been doing this work for a while, not like an expert level. I'd say I'm probably transitioning into maybe intermediate. And this is after many years of doing lots of different types of ceremonies with different shamans and being in this space and having the privilege to talk to many people in this space. Amazing souls. And man, it's hard. Most people are full of caca, unfortunately. And that's where the warrior energy, to bring it back to the warrior, that's where you need to tap into that and discern who's full of caca and who's telling the truth, who's honoring these medicines and who's doing it out of ego. There's lots of ways I can go about it. I actually want to make a part 2 of this video because I've had 3 mushroom ceremonies in this context, and all 3 were differently. So the first one was a fire ceremony under the moonlight, right? The second one was no fire. So this was actually internal, but you still had to sit up the whole night. That's where the rapé came in. And actually, while we were doing the rapé, some people were purging, right? At one point I was on my hands and knees, giving my offerings to the earth, if you want to put it that way. It's a nice way of saying throwing up. But it's a good reframe, actually. And then thunder started coming. And you're in the peak, right? Not only on the peak of the mushrooms, but the rapé, and it's the most powerful rapé I've had in my life. And that was to the point where, like, I had it first, and it just shot me in my body, had the tingling sensation throughout my legs, my arms. And then I went back to my spot. I sat with a straight spine, because like I said earlier, I really struggle to sit long periods of time. My back gets sore, my knees get... it's not good. I really, really struggle. So it's something that I got to work on. And when I had the rapé, I'm like, whoa, oh man, this is exactly what I need. It shot into my body and really being present. But then it was like a delayed reaction, and the tobacco kind of came behind me with a haymaker. It's like slow motion, teeth falling out. And then I was like struggling. I was like a newborn baby. I couldn't even keep my head up, man. And I just had to, oh no. And then the sickness came and purged. And this was like an hour struggling. I couldn't even sit straight, but you couldn't lie down. So again, it really requires a level of discipline, but you can't just lie down, because then you're going to let the whole group down in a way. This is a collective effort, because when one person lies down, that kind of throws off the energy. And yeah. And anyways, on the peak of this, while I'm like struggling and then the thunder comes, and I saw this flash of light. I'm like, wait, is that the medicine that I'm feeling, or is that real? Like, what happened there? And then again, and then you see the storm coming, and the clouds went over our heads, and then you hear, you feel the raindrops, and it starts like raining, and the thunder, and then the wind comes, and you're like, oh man, and you're not undercover, and if the storm hits full force, you're gonna have to stay there. You have no choice. Again, it's about, and that really represented the inner turmoil, not only on an individual level, but even on the world with 2020 and the collective chaos and turbulence and all the craziness that's going on. And it kind of really tested that warrior energy, because the warrior is all about being centered and disciplined and being anchored into earth. And even when a storm comes, you're not going to let it take you off your feet. you're still going to be planted. You're going to feel the storm. Might even be very painful, but you're still there. You're still focused. And so that was a very poetic thing to happen, man. And you had to, it even reminded me of like me being again, going back to the king, being anchored into that place of service and giving, and the warrior archetype of being focused, and me eventually serving my family. I have to be I'm not a husband yet, but I will be. Not officially, so don't go too crazy. But I've been. A lot of you know Yesenia, and she's like a blessing of my life, and I just love her with all my heart and soul. And I'm very. A lot of times I feel like I don't deserve her, man, but I have her, and I got to honor that. And again, do what needs to be done, and be the man that I need to be. And even that storm, because she's a Latin girl, so she's very. The positive sides of having a Latin girl is like you get a lot of passion and soul, but also when those storms come, man, again, as a man, you need to learn to withstand that stuff. You can't fly off the handle. You need to be a rock, especially when she's going through her thing. And that storm represented, in a way, symbolically, it represented the storms that I'm going to have to go through. I go through and still am going to have to go through, especially when we start a family and all that kind of stuff. You got to keep your cool. You got to be level-headed, And so, the storm's coming. It's raining. It's freezing. Right? You've got no fire. But then eventually it passed, man. And it was very, very powerful. And you could imagine in the midst of a mushroom journey. My goodness. Wow. I'll go into that in another time anyways, the third ceremony, which we had, again, just to remind you guys, these are all night ceremonies. All night. And you got to sit up. No sleep time. Sleep is for the weak in this situation. And the third ceremony, we had it was a fire ceremony, but it was in a teepee because we knew it was going to rain all night, which was a whole different thing. But I'll go into these in a separate video. But I just wanted to share this mushroom ceremony with you guys. It was very powerful, and not in a ego death sort of way, because it wasn't, even though we had a heroic dose, but just in a very grounded, centered, connected sort of way. And it was very challenging, actually one of the more challenging ones that I've had, especially just sitting up all night, man, and staying awake. Sometimes the whole trip can be about that, sitting up and being present. And that's very hard for a lot of people. And yeah, man. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. And actually, I just want to share this with you guys because I will be collaborating with this facilitator, shaman. And I don't want to say names or locations or anything here, but if you are in Victoria and you're interested in doing these type of ceremonies, which I don't usually recommend psychedelics, but if you are into it and you feel called to it and you want to do this type of ceremony where it's done right with honor and respect and intention, then go to my website. You can sign up to my email list because I don't want to spread any details here and I don't want to outright offer anything. So let's just say this is just a ceremony connecting with nature. That's all I'll say. But if you want more details, sign up to my email list and I'll send out an email, and then we can kind of go through a process of, I'll give you a call, suss where you're at. And yeah, nothing's official yet, but this is just something that I feel called to do. It just kind of came to me now, and like it's hard to find someone who's legit, and this guy's legit. I might not even email you anytime soon, but I'm just planting a seed. I just thought I'd let you guys know. And so if you're in Victoria, this will be in Victoria. And we'll keep in touch. We will keep in touch. I'm glad to be on this journey with you guys. I appreciate you've been watching this video thus far. I would really love to know if you guys are struggling with anything in particular, whether it's with integration, which is something that is a big area that I find, personally speaking, just being in this space, I see that this is what people struggle with the most, is the integration phase. So if you are struggling with anything in particular, please let me know in the description box, or you can send me an email, and I'd love to help you out. I'd love to just also plug my second channel, Raw Spirituality, where I focus more on spirituality, obviously, but on a more practical, grounded approach and philosophy, particularly Jungian psychology. And I go into like the hero's journey and archetypes and philosophy, but logical philosophy. Like I'm just really trying to do this right and discern myself and not go into woo-woo spirituality. But when I say spirituality, I want to kind of claim that word back and just walking the path, man. Speaking the truth, living within truth, and harmonizing logic, reason, intuition, and purpose all together. You know, go to my second channel, subscribe there if you are interested in these other topics. It's nothing to do with psychedelics, but it's still very relevant to psychedelic integration. So yeah, and if you want to support us, and feel free to go on Patreon. This really supports us into making real, authentic content and gives us creative freedom, especially in this on this channel where we get demonetized and censored a lot. So every penny helps. And yeah, you can check out the description box below for further details. But yeah, man, have a good day, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.